We continue with Wilhelm, who has just revealed to Windsor and Namuel that the current emperor was the winner of a Bhaskar challenge. Now, Wilhelm takes us to a flashback where we can see the king taking on his previous opponent in his wolf form. It turns out that such an incident is restricted from being recorded in the history books because the people didn't want such a tragedy to end up becoming a spectacle. The flashback continues with the wolves staring at each other with deadly intent, and then we see the king's wolf version taking down his opponent with a nasty bite to the neck. Wilhelm continues by saying the royal family has lost too many people to Bhaskar challenges, which is why he believes it's a terribly cruel way to settle issues. Now, we move back to the present day where Windsor and Namuel are both listening to Wilhelm. They don't really look all that impressed, as Windsor believes this is the traitor's way of trying to scare them. However, Wilhelm knows very well that they are not the kind of men to be intimidated with ease. He actually wants Ivel to come out of the Bhaskar battle safe and sound, because he wants him to be the next leader of the kingdom. Despite wanting the blonde prince to shed as little blood as possible, Wilhelm feels that Lulin will try to cheat in order to win the duel. Windsor and Namuel are surprised to hear this, and then Wilhelm states that he wants to help Ivel against his brother, but the problem is that the rules of Bhaskar prevent any kind of trickery or deception. So, before he leaves, Wilhelm asks Windsor and Namuel to look up the records of the staff that served the royal family, rather than those of the royal family members. These records will help our heroes confront Lulin and his cheating tactics with ease. Windsor and Namuel look at each other with conviction and get to work immediately. Later, we see the night boy asking to spar with Ivel as early as sunrise. The blonde prince and Reinel are a bit surprised by this behavior, especially considering the rules of Bhaskar. However, Windsor states that there's a way around everything because the king's personal knight would duel with him every single day till he became bedridden. This means that both of them were dueling even during the Bhaskar challenge. Windsor also reassures his prince that Namuel is keeping an eye on the magician's tower to check whether any of them is helping Lulin. Ivel is surprised to see how eager his team is to help him and also worries for their safety considering how they're trying to bend the rules. However, his crow girl reassures him by turning into her human form and saying that Windsor is right. The night boy is overjoyed to hear Reinel agreeing with him, but Ivel is still a little doubtful. That's when our hero tells him that a beast can be struck down no matter how powerful it might be. She remembers her time in the human world taking care of animals like panthers and wolves, most of whom had been struck down by something as small as an infected wound. Reinel knows that Lulin is going to pull some dirty trick out of his sleeve, so it would be good for Ivel to train for his duel. She then hugs her lover boy in an emotional sequence and says that it's necessary to pull out dirty tricks in order to survive. She also tells Ivel that she wants him to make it out alive, and it melts his heart. It's hard for him to say no to his crow girl, so Ivel tells Windsor to prepare the sparring sessions. Now, we see the men dueling each other with intent, but Windsor can easily spot that Ivel is a little nervous. He tells his prince that he must not let his thoughts take over his actions because the enemy can exploit such a weakness with ease. Of course, Ivel can't help his nervousness because he is fully aware of what Lulin might do if he were to win the duel. Watching the spar from on top of a tree is Reinel, who looks at her lover boy with dreamy eyes. However, she is even more impressed by Windsor, who has some impressive skills. The crow girl comments that she thought he was just a funny side character, but can actually walk the talk as well. Of course, Reinel also wants to be of use to Ivel, and that's when it strikes her that she is neither a noble nor a human. This means that she can carry out her spy crow fantasy and help Ivel by telling him what Lulin is up to. However, our hero isn't the strongest crow in the world, and she doesn't want to risk a repeat of what happened earlier. In the middle of all these thoughts, we see a couple of tweeting birds arguing with each other over some berries on the tree. It's a rather hilarious sight as the cute birds get into an ugly argument, but Reinel gets an idea after seeing them. She calls out to the angry birds and asks them to listen to her suggestion. However, the little birds look at her with creepy faces and tell her to get lost, which makes Reinel funnily intimidated by them. In the meanwhile, we see Lulin, who is simply crying like a little baby because he knows he doesn't stand a chance against Ivel. The third prince is aware of the size and power differences, so he believes that he might just lose within the blink of an eye. Along with Lulin is his archmage, who seems to be plotting something sinister. He looks at the brat prince and reassures him that he is going to win the duel and become the future emperor. Lulin isn't confident about this idea, but then the archmage uses his powers and seemingly transforms into a prince himself, after which he comments that Ivel is going to regret what he did to his brother. While these evil plans are being hatched, Reinel goes to Nadia and asks her to bring some snacks which are for small birds. The maid girl is a little confused by this, but assumes that these are for Reinel's friends. Our hero awkwardly acknowledges this statement, although the angry birds are far from being her buddies. Now, we see a brief flashback to the Crow Girl's negotiations with the little birds, both of whom are rather rude. She proceeds to have a conversation with them in bird language, which has been translated for our convenience. At first, the angry birds are a little suspicious because Reinel is able to understand them. This shouldn't be possible because even though they're birds, Reinel is a different species. That's when one of the birds asks our hero if she had eaten the power berry. The Crow Girl is shocked to hear this and asks them how they know about it, but the birds simply scoff at her and say that she is a kid. The birds go on to say that they have lived much longer and have seen a lot more than Reinel. This prompts our hero to wonder if there is another crow human who is living inside the royal palace. The birds state that the crow person doesn't live at the palace, but does visit from time to time with its human friend. This is big news for Reinel, because if she meets this crow person, she'll finally be able to master her crow form. She even imagines a scene where she is being given a crash course on how to be a crow after eating the power berry. Primarily, Reinel just wants to unlock her secret superpower, which she is personally hoping to be the Crowzilla atomic beams from the movie she had imagined earlier. Our hero quickly asks the angry birds if there is a way for her to meet this crow person, but they both reject the idea with scornful faces. They don't seem to know the location of the crow person, and also say that it does not like other people talking about it. The birds tell Reinel that she should look into the matter herself rather than asking them to do something for her. Reinel thinks that this effort will only be worth the risk once Bhaskar ends, but then the angry birds ask her what she initially wanted to tell them. Our hero switches the topic to Lulin, and then we see Ivel falling to the ground after getting defeated by Windsor. The night boy tells his prince that he got distracted and shouldn't allow this to happen. That's when Ivel reveals that he noticed Reinel talking to the angry birds, and it makes Windsor upset because this isn't really the time to be showing jealousy. However, Ivel is fascinated to see Reinel talking to other birds for such a long time. As a matter of fact, he even fantasizes about the birds flirting with her in a fancy fashion. Windsor is not at all impressed by his prince's behavior, and tells him that he still has a long way to go in his training. If the birds are really distracting Ivel that much, then Windsor will be more than happy to slash his apparent rivals in half. Of course, it's only natural for the night boy to become dramatic, so Ivel tells him the birds are too small to cut anyway. Also, he reaffirms that the term rival is a bit of an exaggeration. Despite this, Windsor is still eager to slice up the birds and activates a shady smile which forces Ivel to continue with his training to avoid a possible tragedy. Even Reinel hilariously feels something ominous, and worries that something bad will happen if she continues talking to the angry birds. By now, she's already told the birds about spying on Lulin, and they're happy to do this because they don't like the brat prince either. It turns out that Lulin would throw pebbles at the birds for no good reason, which has led them to remember his bratty face, even though birds aren't really good at identifying humans. Of course, our hero finds this extremely childish, which is all the more reason for her to find out what the third prince is planning for the duel. However, the angry birds strike a savage pose and tell Reinel that they expect a handsome reward for their efforts because nothing in life comes for free. The Crow Girl accepts their demands like a timid child and goes on to tell Ivel everything. The blonde prince is somewhat amused to hear this, especially when Reinel reveals that she's promised to bribe the birds with some snacks, which was why she had asked Nadia to make some bird treats earlier. The whole situation is quite funny for us as the audience, but Ivel doesn't seem to feel the same way. As a matter of fact, he clenches his fists and apologizes to Reinel because he thinks that she's not been living a good life ever since she was kidnapped by Lulin. Ivel is of the opinion that he is getting in the way of Reinel and her freedom because his involvement with her is almost like a curse. Now, the blonde prince remembers his time as a child and tells his crow girl that he had always felt anxious from an early age. This was because there was doubt about his legitimacy as a ruler due to his powers not awakening. Such a dreaded childhood would obviously have adverse effects on a young prince, so Ivel confesses that he couldn't even believe in himself after he awakened his wolf powers. The lover boy sheds a few tears and laments that he is not dependable. He feels that all his efforts only cause more pain to those he cares for. If that is the case, then he is really clueless as to how he can help Ivel. An intense shot follows as we see a reflection of Ivel as a child in the same hopeless form while he curses himself for being a burden to Reinel. This is too much for the crow girl to handle, so she holds Ivel's hand and tells him that she loves him. Our hero states that the only reason she is here is that she wants to, otherwise she can fly off to wherever she wishes. Reinel further explains to her lover boy that she had asked the other birds to spy on Lulin because she wanted to help him, and not because he wasn't dependable. The blonde prince is pleased to hear this, so he thanks his crow girl for always being there to rescue him from the dreaded shackles of his own past. Now, we shift from the romantic couple to Namuel, who is having a hard time with the other magicians of the palace. As expected, most of the magicians don't want to get involved with the politics of the royal family, and it's difficult for Namuel to get in touch with the elder magicians. At the same time, he suspects that one of the elder magicians is helping Lulin, but he still hasn't been able to identify who he is. All he wishes for is one tiny clue, and then we see the third prince with the archmage. The next morning, we see the angry birds enjoying their bird snacks while Raynell caws at them. Ivel, Windsor, and Nadia are all peeping on the birds, and the night boy is impressed with Raynell for using other birds as spies. Nadia is also proud of her mistress for being so smart, but her gesture only inspires Windsor to turn her into the female version of himself. He is ready to teach Nadia the ways of excessive praise and sacrifice, but Ivel comments that he cannot afford to have another Windsor roaming around him. The night boy hilariously takes this as a compliment, but Ivel and Nadia run towards Raynell after assuming that she's done with her spy chat. Everyone is eager to learn what information has just been shared with the crow girl, and Raynell strikes a savage pose as if to show that her idea was nothing short of a genius plan. We're all waiting for the big reveal, but then our hero simply caws as a human when she starts narrating the spy intel. Ivel and his team are visibly surprised to hear this, so the blonde prince asks Raynell to explain the information in a little more detail. Raynell gives it another shot and even turns into her chibai form for added drama. However, it's the same cawing sound, and Ivel reveals to her that she's speaking in bird language. This takes our hero by surprise, so she reaches out to her crow instinct for translation assistance. The crow instinct is upset that Raynell only approaches her when she needs help, but will happily allow the translation because she doesn't like Lulin either. Now, our hero finally explains that the third prince is regularly meeting someone in private who has a beard and a creepy voice. Since birds aren't very good at telling people apart, they were not able to describe the archmage any better, but we as the audience know exactly who they're talking about. On top of this, the birds could feel a deadly aura emanating from the archmage, which made them want to exit the scene as soon as possible. Raynell adds that the archmage didn't look as if he was from this world, so Ivel wonders if this much information will be enough for Namuel to identify the mystery magician. He is confident in his magician boy's ability, so he goes to Namuel and describes the archmage to him. Namuel is made to ponder for a while, and then he comes up with a possible match to the description. This person's name is revealed to be Vafilos, who is one of the elder magicians. Namuel remembers a rumor which claims that Vafilos has been experimenting with dark magic, which makes it all the more important for everyone to be alert during the Bhaskar battle. There's no telling what kind of trick Vafilos might pull out of his sleeve, so a backup plan is most definitely necessary. Namuel wants to know how Ivel got hold of such critical information because it wouldn't have been easy to do so. He asks his prince if he used his secret shadow informant for this, but Ivel states that he is unable to do this because of the rules of Bhaskar. He does state that he's found a new informant but doesn't reveal the name to Namuel, quite frankly because he doesn't know them. That's when we see Raynell hilariously fending off the angry birds who are charging at the windows asking for more snacks. Our hero is in visible discomfort, but Nadia mistakes this to be a cute moment between her mistress and her enthusiastic friends. The next day, Raynell and Ivel sit down for a meal, but she senses something off about her lover boy. That's when it comes to her mind that today is the day of the Bhaskar challenge, and this could very well be Ivel's last meal with her if things don't go as planned. Now, some narration explains to us that Bhaskar might be a battle between wolves, but because of the human factor, it can lead to severe consequences. Normally, a wolf should usually just surrender and accept defeat if things get too tricky for him. After all, if the injuries are too deadly, he might not even be able to hunt for the rest of his life. However, Bhaskar is better understood as a battle between humans in their wolf costumes, which means that the winner will keep biting till his opponent drops dead. Of course, the crow girl doesn't want her lover boy to be drenched with blood, and Ivel can notice the frown on her face. He promises Raynell that he has made a backup plan thanks to the information she has managed to obtain through the spy birds. However, our hero is still feeling anxious, so Ivel gets her to agree to perform a ceremony for good luck. She just has to close her eyes, and then Ivel switches to Playboy mode where he kisses her lips, but with his palm in between them. The lover boy asks his princess if he can do the real thing upon winning the duel, but this overwhelms Raynell with emotion, and she transforms into a crow once again. Ivel is visibly amused to see how shy his crow girl is, and he thanks her for taking away his nervousness. The blonde prince promises Raynell that he will make it out of the duel alive because she is his motivation to do so. Now, we shift to the battle dome where both Ivel and Lulin are getting ready to face off for their battle. The king shows up and begins the proceedings, thus setting us up for an eventful encounter. Everyone in attendance starts talking about the battle, but they don't think that Ivel has that much of a chance because his brother has been a wolf for longer. Obviously, Windsor doesn't take too kindly to these words, but Wilhelm tells him to calm down. Namuel also suggests punishing the gossip mongers later, but Nadia understands Windsor's feelings because she would feel the same way if anyone spoke about Raynell the same way. Raynell is also here in her crow form, and she prays for Ivel as Bhaskar begins. The king lays down the rules for the contest, which is basically that the winner shall become the next emperor, and no cheating or additional intervention is allowed. If there is anything suspicious to be inspected, then the elder magicians are in attendance to investigate it. In the case that they find something odd, the cheater will simply have to accept the fate bestowed upon him by the other participant. However, Phafilos is among the elder magicians, so it's fair to assume that there's an evil plan lurking around somewhere. Now, Ivel and Lulin change into their wolf forms, and an intense battle begins. However, we have to wait for the results because we are now taken to a flashback. Here, Ivel becomes a narrator, and talks about how his family was peaceful and happy at one point of time, but things quickly fell apart once his mother fell ill. Priests and healers from all over the kingdom were summoned to cure her, but it was of no use. This led the king to devote all his time to his beloved wife, but he ended up neglecting his sons in the process. Eventually, Lulin awakened his wolf powers, but the problem was that he also became more arrogant with it. As expected, the nobles saw this as a chance to divide the empire for their own selfish reason. That's when we learn that there was a middle child, called the second prince, who had unfortunately met an early end due to what was claimed to be a horse riding accident. Of course, nobody really believed this to be an actual accident, because it was common knowledge that the children would be fighting for the throne now. It is heavily implied that Lulin was the one who ended his brother during this fateful incident. And to make matters worse, the queen followed soon after due to the shock of hearing the tragic news. It was this very moment that split up the imperial family, and nothing was the same after that. Now, we are back to the present where both Ivel and Lulin are going at each other in the duel. However, the Wolf Prince is upset because he is fighting his own brother in a power struggle for the throne. He wishes for things to go back to the way they were when the queen was still alive, but such dreams can hardly become a reality. The fight wages on for a while, and Nadia covers her eyes because she's seen a bit too much bloodthirsty wolves. Namuel explains that both brothers are fighting with their lives, so it's expected for the battle to be drawn out. However, Wilhelm is a little confused to see Ivel talking so long to finish his brother. It's obvious that the Wolf Prince is the more overpowered fighter, but Wilhelm assumes that Lulin is pulling out his hidden powers because he's been pushed into the corner. Of course, he also knows that Phafilos might have played a dirty trick, which is why the duel is going on for hours. That's when an old maid makes her appearance and comments that Wilhelm has a good eye. She asks how the battle is going on, because she has a weak eye and isn't able to see things clearly. Windsor allows the old maid to sit with his team but senses something odd about the old maid. He can feel some mysterious energy emanating from her, so he decides to keep an eye on the maid for now. Back to the battle, it looks like Ivel is the one dominating his brother, and the old maid passes a comment. Wilhelm seems to know who she is, but chooses not to say anything alarming. Instead, he says that Ivel might have a problem in the long run if this fight carries on for a while. Even Namuel senses something odd, and then he makes a critical observation. Lulin doesn't look like he's feeling any pain from any of the attacks Ivel is hitting him with. The third prince has red eyes that glow like a demon, which hints at the fact that he has been boosted by dark magic, thanks to Phafilos. Raynell starts to worry because she makes an even deadlier observation. It's bad enough that Lulin is behaving as if he has no survival instinct, but whenever he bites Ivel, he reacts a bit differently. Raynell is able to understand this because of her experience working with animals. She remembers a critical weapon when it came to dealing with animals that would escape from time to time. This weapon was a taser, and Ivel's current reaction to Lulin's bites is like that of an animal that has just been struck by a taser. It all starts to make sense for the crow girl, but then the old maid looks at her with an evil smirk. She seems to be able to read Raynell's mind but comments that she has not come here for the crow girl. Instead, she will just sit and observe proceedings for now. The battle of the wolves continues to unfold, and Ivel's body starts to develop black scars due to his brother's electrical bite. It doesn't take long for Ivel to realize that Lulin is under a spell that not only increases his strength, but also his speed and overall stamina. In addition to this, Lulin also has been boosted by a spell that removes the sensations of fear and pain. This is exactly why the third prince has been able to fight Ivel for so long without flinching or showing any signs of slowing down. On top of that, Lulin also has an electricity spell casted upon him, which explains the taser attacks. Ivel knew that his brother was going to cheat, but he never thought he would use so many spells to gain an advantage. The third prince has also chosen spells which cannot be detected easily, which makes things even more tricky for Ivel. However, he only has to wait and stay calm because of what Namuel told him earlier. We're taken to a brief flashback where Namuel tells Ivel that he's going to give him some advice, which is technically against the rules, but there's a loophole. Informing someone on how to deal with animals affected by dark magic has nothing to do with Bhaskar, so Namuel can offer a short explanation. Basically, the key strategy is that Ivel should not unleash all his powers upon Lulin, because then he will not have any energy left when his brother will unleash the hidden dark magic. Also, he must avoid getting any of Lulin's blood on his body, because it might lead to a curse. This explains why the Wolf Prince has not been going all out against his brother. It's a rather tricky situation because it's hard not to spill blood during a duel, but Ivel needs to minimize the damage as much as he can. Back to the battle, Namuel can observe that Ivel is following his advice, but is still unable to detect what kind of spell has been cast upon Lulin. The magician boy runs through some possible scenarios, but he knows that Phelos is an elder magician, so suggesting something suspicious to him will only get dismissed. Basically, Ivel needs to win the duel, or the king will have to bring someone in with more authority. The problem is that the other elder magicians might also be in on Lulin's plan, so the only person with higher authority is the chief imperial magician. However, this person does not show himself in public, and only works secretly, so it's going to be tough to call him here. Namuel knows that he'll have to bet his life on this, but he needs to collect reliable evidence because he can't just say that he has a hunch. As he wonders what to do, Reinel tries to tell him that Lulin is using some kind of electricity spell. However, she can only call like a crow, and it leads to a hilarious moment. Our hero laments that Namuel isn't as smart as she thought he would be, and even goes on to play a game of charades to try and get her point across. Windsor seems to realize that Reinel wants to pause Bhaskar, and she agrees because Ivel will get into trouble because of the electricity spell, no matter how strong he might be. Windsor cannot understand bird language, but he sides with Reinel and charges with her to stop the fight. Namuel and Wilhelm try to calm them down because there is no solid evidence to back their claims. Wilhelm even doubts Reinel's advice and calls her a bird of death, but Windsor angrily defends her, even though he used to do the same thing before. Wilhelm says that everyone needs to discuss their argument, but Nadia doesn't know what to do. The old maid tells her to wait it out for now, and then Nadia asks her which part of the palace she works at. The old maid changes the topic and brings our attention to Ivel, who is now holding down Lulin. Namuel figures that the Wolf Prince has figured out the spells and is going to win the duel without spilling any blood. Everyone breathes a sigh of relief, especially Reinel, but then a shocking twist unfolds. Lulin turns into a human and tells the king that Ivel has been cheating. A flashback shows Phelos telling Lulin that if he is unable to win against Ivel despite all the spells that have been cast upon him, then framing his brother is the only option to win. The useless prince tells the king that Ivel has been receiving assistance from Namuel in the form of dark magic, so judgment needs to be passed. Everyone is in shock and disbelief over this unbelievable twist, and even Reinel is lost for words. However, the chapter ends here and so does this video. What happens next? Like, share, and subscribe to find out in the next video. See you soon.